Do you want to know the secret to happy, healthy relationships? Do you wish you had a surefire solution to all relationship issues? Do you wish that you could get rid of anxiety and worry in your life? Do you wish you could overcome things that have hurt you and heal from that pain? Well, stick with me, because today we're talking about the one thing that revolutionized my life and relationships, and I know it's done the same for many other people. And I guarantee that if you implement this one thing, it will revolutionize your life and your relationships. I'm Jenny from Love More to Live, where we talk about relationships, getting healthy so that all your relationships can be healthy. If you're new here and you haven't yet subscribed, you might want to do that now so that you don't miss out on future videos. So let's talk about this one thing. What is this one thing? It's called surrender. And I'm really hoping that I'm going to be able to do it justice, because it's a topic that's so near to my heart and it's done so much for me that I'm hoping I'm going to be able to express to you the urgency of learning how to surrender and the transformation it can bring to your life. What does God want from us? What does He want from you? Does He want your behavior? Does He want your good works? Does He want your cooperation with Him? Perhaps He wants those things, but ultimately God wants your and my heart. In Proverbs 23 verse 26, He says, "My son, my daughter, give me your heart." This is what God is asking for, because He knows that if He has your heart, He has everything, because the heart, out of the heart are the issues of life. Everything stems from the heart. In the physical body, the heart is what keeps the body alive. It keeps pumping the blood and keeps things circulating. And in the same way, the heart, spiritually speaking, keeps the spiritual being alive. And so if God has the heart, then He has everything. He will have your behavior, He will have your thoughts, He will have your feelings, He will have your choices, He will have your reactions and your responses. He will have all of you. So what is surrender? Surrender is a letting go of me, letting go of my will and my way, and allowing God to be in charge of me. It's that simple, but it's pretty hard. So it means giving God everything in your life and giving Him permission to lead you, to guide you, and choosing to cooperate with Him in what He shows you and what He asks you to do. So does that mean that's a once-off thing where you say, okay, I surrender my life to God now and it's done and I can carry on with my way? No, what it means is it includes that once-off, Lord, I give my life to you, but then we have to redo that every single day. We have to daily give ourselves to God and hourly give ourselves to God, and even sometimes moment by moment surrender ourselves to God so that He can work His will in us. So what's the danger of not being surrendered? Well, not being surrendered means that you'll be operating outside of Christ, without Him, on your own wisdom, your own thoughts, your own feelings, your own history, which could be driving you. You will project your own issues onto others in relationships, because that's what we naturally do when we're not surrendered to Christ. You will see things from your perspective only and not be able to see things from someone else's perspective. And you will operate on your own weaknesses and irritations instead of God's Spirit working in you. How do we actually do this surrender thing, practically speaking? Well, you know what? Surrender is the surrender, the giving up of ourselves and cooperating with God. And Jesus gave us the example in Gethsemane when he was on the ground struggling with the decision to go through with Calvary. Should he? And he got to the point where he said, "Father, if possible, please take this cup from me, but if not my will, but thine be done." And that's the challenge for every one of us, to say, not my will in this moment, but thine be done. Not my will right now when I'm feeling irritated with my kids, or when somebody says something that just upsets me, when a car just pulls in front of me and really ticks me off. Are we prepared to say, not my will, but thine be done, O Lord? So, when should you surrender? Every day, sometimes every hour, and sometimes moment by moment. You know, when I began this journey of surrender 20 years ago, I would say to the Lord in the morning, Lord, I really want to walk with you today. I really want to be with you. I want to be close to you. I want to be connected with you. And I would get to the end of the day and I'd be like, okay, Lord, so where did you go? What happened? Because I somehow lost him. I lost my connection with God. And then I decided, well, you know what? I'm going to do something about this. So I set my alarm for every hour. And every hour when that alarm went off, all I did was I just reached out in my mind and I said, Lord, I give myself to you again. I put myself in your hands. I surrender my thoughts, my feelings, my choices. I surrender all that I am to you. Please show me if there's something I haven't surrendered to you. Only took a few minutes, not even a few minutes, a few seconds to just say that. And as I did that repeatedly, it began to create a habit in me of constantly turning to God in my mind and constantly maintaining that connection with him. And soon I found myself going throughout the day and getting to the end of the day and realizing God was with me all day. You see, it's not God that leaves us. It's us that leave him. We are the ones that break the connection with him. It's not God's will for us to be outside of him and disconnected from him. He wants that connection, but we are the ones that have to reach out and say, I want this. So take the time, train yourself into a new habit of saying, Lord, I give myself to you right now. You be in charge of me. So what if you forget and you realize, oh, I've gotten irritated, or I've allowed this anxiety and this worry to take over my life, and it's making me irritated with family members and friends, or I've made a wrong choice here. Oh, now what do I do? Well, if you haven't surrendered, then surrender when you remember. And that simply means if you realize, oh, I've broken my connection, I've messed up, then just come back to God and say, Lord, I'm sorry, I broke my connection with you. I forgot to check with you what you wanted for me in this moment. Please just take me again. I put myself in your hands. Forgive me for making the mistake. Forgive me for not choosing to surrender to you in the moment and giving in to my irritation or my impatience or my anxiety or whatever it is that you gave into. Please just reconnect me with you. And God is right there immediately. He doesn't hold off and say, well, you need to earn your way back a little bit and suffer for a little bit. No, God is right there. When we turn to him and say, I want you, I need you, he is right there saying, here I am. So what happens when you do surrender? What happens to you when you do surrender? Philippians 2 verse 13 tells us, it says, for God will work in you to will and to do according to his good pleasure. That means he will work in you to be willing to do his will, and he will give you the power to do it. In other words, everything that he asks of you, he will give you power to do. And God actually puts Ezekiel 36 verse 26 and 27 into action when we choose to put ourselves into his hands. And this is what it says. It says, a new heart also will I give you, and a new spirit will I put within you. And I will take away the stony heart out of your flesh, and I will put within you a heart of flesh. And I will put my spirit within you, and cause you to walk in my statutes, and ye shall keep my judgments and do them. Wow. So God promises when we put ourselves in his hands, he promises to do this amazing work of transformation, an exchange that happens of taking an ugly heart out of us and putting in within us a new heart, a heart that wants to do his will, a heart that has his spirit within us, a heart that wants to obey God, a heart that is changed and transformed and in harmony with God. How much easier the Christian life would be if we just did this. Wouldn't it? It wouldn't be so much of a struggle and a battle. And I will tell you this, that the struggle of the Christian life is actually the struggle to surrender. Once we have surrendered, the struggle goes away. Just as Jesus in the Garden of Gethsemane, he struggled, he sweated blood, saying, Lord, not my will, but thine be done. Not my will, but thine be done. But once he got to that point and he said, not my will, thine be done, an angel came and strengthened him to go through what lay before him. And God will do the same for us. When we give ourselves to him and surrender ourselves to him, he comes in and he empowers us to cooperate with him and do what he's asking us to do. So what did surrender do for me? Surrender changed my life. it just changed everything about my life. But most of all, importantly, it made me take ownership of my thoughts and my feelings, my reactions and my responses, which meant that there was less trouble in my relationships because I was dealing with me. And this is where relationship issues begin. It begins with me. And that doesn't mean necessarily that you're always wrong or that you always have to just give in. Surrender does not mean that you turn into a doormat. Surrender means that you're allowing God to be in charge of you. And what surrender did for me was it made me tougher. It made me confront people that were hurting me. It gave me the courage to go and do the hard things that I thought I could never do. And in this way, it transformed my life. Now, for someone who's not timid and fearful like I was, and shy and afraid and afraid of confrontation, for someone who's bold and forward and loud and maybe too talkative or whatever, what surrender will do for you is tone you down. So depending on your weaknesses, your particular weaknesses and your issues that you have in your life, God is going to, through surrender, balance you and make you a whole, healthy, complete person. This is what surrender did for me. And this is why I'm so, it's like my favorite thing to talk about because it has so much transformed my life. It has made such a huge difference to me. I'm not the person I used to be. I'm not the person I used to be because of surrender. So what did it do in my relationships? Well, let me go through for you. My relationship with God was transformed because it just became more real and vibrant because I was surrendering to God, and it was exciting. God began to show me new things and teach me new things and help me overcome things, and it was just an amazing journey. So I became the relationship with God became more constant with less lows and depression because I was trusting in God through faith and not feeling. So on a day when I felt like God wasn't near, I would say to Him, Lord, I surrender myself to you today. I know that your word says that you are with me. I trust that and I believe that, and I thank you that you are with me, and I'm not going to listen to my feelings. I will operate on faith because your word says so. And so I had less lows and less depressed times, spiritually speaking. I also started hearing from God more, and this is important because hearing from God, the first step to hearing from God is the surrender of your will, because otherwise your own thoughts and your own thinking and your own inclinations will get in the way, and you will be questioning, okay, is this God or is this me, or who is this? What is this? How do I know this is from God? But when we neutralize our own will and say, not my will but thine be done, then we can begin recognizing when God is speaking to us and leading us. And this is the prerequisite for knowing God's will in your life. You have to have your will neutralized. So I began to hear from God, and He began to answer so many of my prayers because I was praying more in harmony with Him. Instead of just praying my own wishes and my own wills, I would be saying, Lord, not my will, but thine be done. What do you want for me in this situation? Is it okay if I pray for this? Bring my will into harmony with you. So that was my relationship with God. Then my relationship with myself improved because I was surrendering myself to God. He began to change me, and I began to like myself more because I was doing things that I never thought I could do. Speaking to strangers, answering the telephone. Excuse me, I know that sounds dumb, but for me, I had a fear of the telephone. I did not like speaking on the phone. And I began to develop talents in myself that I didn't know I had. I began to stand up for myself. I began to think for myself. I began to have difficult conversations. I began to confront abusive behaviors in relationships around me. I became less timid and fearful and shy. And I healed from a lot of hurt from my past, including emotional abuse. Because when we are wounded and hurt, we can bring that woundedness to God and say, Lord, I give this to you. I surrender this to you. Heal it in me. So my relationship with myself was transformed. Then my relationship with my husband was also transformed because I was able to start talking about the things that bothered me instead of just swallowing them and not saying anything. It drew us closer together because we were both surrendering. And so the closer we came to God, the closer we came to each other. And we were able to talk about these things and talk about surrender. And we started learning this process together and putting it into practice together. And it brought us so much closer together. And we started to be in harmony. Our thoughts and thinking were in harmony with each other because we were both surrendering to God. I began to take ownership for my mistakes in the relationship and started owning them and taking responsibility for them and working on them instead of just blaming my husband for what I thought he was doing wrong. I began to project less onto him, my own woundedness, and I started taking ownership of those things. I also became less defensive. It's something that I've had to work on a lot for a long time, becoming defensive. And I know there are reasons for that, and maybe I can talk about that in a different video. If you're interested, let me know in a comment below and I'll make a video on being defensive. I became less defensive. I say less defensive because I haven't overcome that yet. I still tend to jump to that as my first response when I'm corrected or when something's pointed out that I've done wrong. And yeah, that's a story for another day. Okay, and then my relationship with my kids improved because surrender helped me to become more firm and decided, because I wavered and vacillated so much with discipline and training of my kids, and I wasn't constant in my dealings with them. And so I began to have the courage to give consequences and to stick by those consequences and to follow through with my children. And I began to see the results in them. They began to respond to me. They began to hug me and kiss me more and say, "I love you, mommy." And I enjoyed them more. Instead of just loving my kids, I actually began to like them. And it began with me surrendering to God and saying, "Lord, what do you want me to do in this situation? Help me, show me what I must do." And God would impress my mind of what to do in that moment. And it made a huge difference to how I disciplined, how I trained my kids, and how I spent time with them. And it's just so much that happened. I became more patient, and I began to, most importantly, look at the heart of my children instead of just the behavior. Because God was dealing with my own heart, I began to recognize when my children weren't surrendered, and I began to teach them how to surrender their hearts in the moment too. When they were irritated or grumpy or didn't want to do their chores, God helped me to deal with their hearts instead of just the behavior. My relationships with others were also transformed. I was able to talk to strangers without first being spoken to. I was actually able to go up to a complete stranger and say, "Hi, I'm Jenny," and begin a conversation and then keep a conversation going. And for me, that was transformational. I will say this though, it wasn't easy for me to do that. I had to struggle with choosing to cooperate with God. You know, it's one thing to say, "Okay, Lord, I surrender myself to you," but then to actually go and do what God is asking you to do, that takes courage. But God promises that He will work in us both to will and to do. And I found that as I went and chose to go and do and saying, "Lord, just give me the words to say, tell me what to do here, put the words in my mouth because I don't have them," God would do that every single time. And I began to be set free from fear that had held me in bondage my whole life, of this shyness and timidity that made me miserable. Because of this, I appeared less snobby. Yes, I've had people tell me that when they first met me, they thought I was a real snob. And it's only because I was timid and shy and not just open and friendly. I was also able to begin confronting toxicity in some of my friendships. And that, even though that was hard to do, it did make my friendships healthy. And I've lost some friendships because of that. And then lastly, with my relationships with others, I became less passive in friendships. I've learned how to reach out and not just be, but to be a true friend and to reach out and say, "Hey, how are you doing?" and not just wait for someone else to speak to me first. So, wow, the impact of surrender on my life has been profound. And I just wish it for you. I just wish it for you, but I can't give you what God has given me. You have to go get it for yourself. And so if this has given you a taste for that kind of life, transformed relationships, then please go to God and say, "Lord, I want this. I don't know how to do it. I don't understand it fully and completely, but show me how to surrender myself to you so that you can work this transformation in my life." I urge you, I encourage you, please go do it, because it's going to transform your life. And if it does, if you do this and it does, please reach out to me and let me know how it's changed your life. So like I said, this doesn't mean that surrender is easy and you just give yourself to God and everything is hunky-dory and you have no hassles. No, it may be the hardest thing you ever do with your life. In fact, we're told that it's sometimes the greatest struggle, the hardest battle we've ever fought is to deny ourselves and to surrender ourselves to God. But if you want a vibrant, exciting walk with God, if you want peace and freedom from worry and anxiety, if you want healthier relationships, I cannot recommend anything more than surrender yourself to God. Learn how to surrender your heart and your life to God. And if you don't know how to surrender, then just say, Lord, teach me. He's promised in His Word, John 6:45, they shall be all taught of God. They shall be all taught of God. God is able to teach you. He doesn't need anybody else to teach you. He can teach you Himself. That's what He did for me. And so just go for it. So I want to challenge you. To start praying this prayer. And I'm going to put it in the description box below so you can copy and paste it and print it out for yourself. But this is the prayer that I want to encourage you to start praying every day. I'm going to read it to you. It says, "Take me, Lord, as wholly yours. I give you all that I am and all that I hope to be. I lay all my plans at your feet. If there's any area of my life I haven't given over to you, please show me. And help me to surrender every thought and feeling to you daily, hourly, and even moment by moment. Help me to let go of self in the moment and seek your will in every situation. Please come and bring my will and life into harmony with you and do what you promised, working in me to will and to do what pleases you." So I urge you, print this prayer out and begin to pray this prayer daily, multiple times a day if you need to. Set your alarm and start working on learning how to give yourself to God, and then begin seeing what God does in your life. If you have any questions about this, please leave a comment below or send me an email. The email address is in the box below, and I'd be happy to, and I know Richard would be happy to help anyone on the journey of learning how to surrender to God completely. Phew! If this video was helpful to you, please give it a thumbs up. And if you haven't yet subscribed, hit that subscribe button and the bell so that you don't miss out on future videos. And let me know how it goes.